A cold wind cuts through the dying grass, rattling the brittle branches overhead. The backyard is small, forgotten, a patch of dirt and weeds boxed in by a sagging wooden fence. At first glance, it looks empty. But in the farthest corner, half hidden in the shadows, a German shepherd lies curled up in the dirt. His name is Rex, though no one calls him that. His coat, once thick and proud, is now dull and patchy, tangled with mud and dried leaves. His ribs press against his skin, sharp and unforgiving, as if his body has given up trying to hold on to the little meat he has left. A heavy chain wraps around his neck, the metal rusted where rain and time have eaten away at it. It stretches only a few feet, just far enough for him to reach the dented metal bowl near his paws. The water inside is stagnant, dark with dirt, dead leaves floating on the surface. He doesn't move. Not when the wind shifts. Not when a car door slams in the distance. Not even when a door to the house creaks open, and heavy footsteps crunch across the porch. The man in the doorway barely glances at him. Just tosses something onto the ground, half a slice of stale bread, a leftover bone with no meat on it. Then he turns and goes back inside, letting the screen door slam shut behind him. Rex lowers his head, staring at the scraps without interest. Hunger gnaws at his belly, but it's a familiar pain, something he's learned to live with. He knows better than to expect more. He knows better than to expect anything. The house is warm inside. He's seen glimpses of it through the cracked door, a flickering television, the soft glow of a kitchen light. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, he can smell food cooking. Rich, heavy smells, chicken, beef, buttery bread. He's never tasted any of it. His food comes from the garbage. Sometimes, not at all. Days blur together. The seasons change, but nothing else does. In the summer, the sun beats down on him, turning the dirt to burning dust beneath his paws. In the winter, frost creeps over his fur, settling into the cracks of his dry, calloused skin. He shivers when it rains, curling into himself to stay warm. But no one comes for him. No one checks on him. To them, he is just there. A background fixture. A dog-shaped shadow wasting away behind the house. Then, one afternoon, something changes. A voice, soft, unfamiliar, drifts over the fence. "Hey, buddy." Rex barely flicks an ear. People have passed by before. Kids, joggers, delivery drivers. They never stop. Never notice him. But this one does. Fingers curl around the top of the fence, knuckles pale from the pressure. A woman, peering over the edge, eyes widening in horror as she takes him in. The chain. The filth. The sunken look in his eyes. "Oh my God," she breathes. Rex watches her, expression unreadable. He doesn't get up. Doesn't wag his tail. Doesn't move an inch. He's learned not to get excited. It only leads to disappointment. The woman disappears, but she doesn't leave. He hears the shuffle of hurried footsteps, the click of a phone being dialed. Then murmured words, urgent, sharp-edged with anger. Rex doesn't know what's being said. But something in her tone, something in the way her voice rises and falls, makes his heart beat a little faster. The next day, the rescue team arrives. Two figures step into the yard, moving cautiously, their boots crunching on dead grass. One carries a clipboard, the other a leash. Their eyes scan the yard, locking onto Rex in an instant. A sick look crosses their faces. They've seen this before, too many times. One of them kneels, stretching out a gloved hand. "Hey, boy." Rex stiffens. His muscles go tight, his breath shallow. A flicker of something, fear. Instinct, shudders through him. The chain rattles as he shifts his weight. For the first time in years, someone is reaching out to him. For the first time in years, someone sees him. And he has no idea what to do. The shelter is warm, the air thick with the scent of kibble and disinfectant. Dogs bark from every corner, their voices blending into a constant hum, some excited, some anxious, some pleading for attention. But Rex stays silent. He sits in the farthest kennel, pressed against the cold metal bars, his head low, his eyes dull. The fresh blanket they gave him remains untouched. The bowl of food sits full, not a single bite taken. Even when the volunteers stop by, gently coaxing, whispering kind words, he doesn't move. It's not fear. It's something deeper. Something worse. It's as if he's already given up. The other dogs wag their tails when people walk by. They push their noses through the bars, eager for a scratch, a treat, any sign that they matter. But Rex? He doesn't even lift his head. The scars on his body tell one story. The emptiness in his eyes tells another. A few people stop to look at him. Some ask about his past, their voices filled with pity. Others shake their heads, murmuring about how damaged he seems. They move on quickly, drawn to dogs that jump and spin, tails wagging with endless hope. Days pass. Then a week. The shelter workers watch Rex with growing concern. He still won't eat. He won't make eye contact. When someone reaches for him, he flinches, muscles going tight, bracing for something that never comes. They've seen cases like this before, dogs too broken to heal. Dogs who, no matter how much love they're given, stay lost in the past. And they're afraid Rex is one of them. Then Sarah walks in. She's been rescuing dogs for years, but the second she sees him, something shifts. She kneels outside his kennel, ignoring the eager paws scraping at the metal from the other cages. Her eyes soften as she takes him in. The hollow look. The way his ribs push through his fur. The way he doesn't even bother to acknowledge her presence. She doesn't speak at first. Just sits. Waiting. Minutes pass. The other dogs bark and whine, but Sarah doesn't move. She just watches Rex. Not with pity. Not with expectation. Just quiet understanding. Then, finally, she says 3 words. "You're safe now." He doesn't react. Doesn't lift his head. Doesn't move an inch. But she sees it. A flicker in his eyes, so small, so brief, it could be imagined. But she knows it's real. The next day, she signs the papers. She's taking him home. The first few days at Sarah's home feel like another shelter, just bigger, quieter. Rex moves cautiously, hugging the walls, his eyes scanning every doorway like he expects something bad to happen. The other dogs rush to greet him, tails wagging, noses sniffing, bodies wiggling with excitement. But Rex stays frozen, his muscles tight, his head low. He doesn't growl. He doesn't run. He just stands there, like he's waiting for someone to tell him where he's allowed to exist. Sarah watches from a distance. She doesn't push. Doesn't call his name, he wouldn't come anyway. Instead, she lets him see. Lets him hear. Lets him feel the warmth of a place that isn't a cage, isn't a chain, isn't a prison. At first, he barely eats. She places fresh kibble in front of him, but he just stares at it, his ribs still sharp beneath his dull fur. Old habits die hard. He's learned food isn't always promised. That eating too fast might mean there's nothing left later. So he waits. Hours pass before he takes his first bite. But he does eat. The days stretch on, and Rex stays at the edges of everything. He watches the other dogs chase each other through the yard, rolling in the grass, snapping playfully at the air. His ears twitch when they bark, his head tilting ever so slightly, like he's trying to understand why they're so happy. One evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and deep purples, Sarah sits on the porch, a cup of tea warming her hands. The other dogs settle around her, tongues lolling, eyes sleepy from an afternoon of play. But Rex lingers near the fence, caught between two worlds, one he's always known and one he doesn't understand. Then, something shifts. He steps forward. Just one paw. Then another. The first few days at Sarah's home feel like another shelter, just bigger, quieter. Rex moves cautiously, hugging the walls, his eyes scanning every doorway like he expects something bad to happen. The other dogs rush to greet him, tails wagging, noses sniffing, bodies wiggling with excitement. But Rex stays frozen, his muscles tight, his head low. He doesn't growl. He doesn't run. He just stands there, like he's waiting for someone to tell him where he's allowed to exist. Sarah watches from a distance. She doesn't push. Doesn't call his name, he wouldn't come anyway. Instead, she lets him see. Lets him hear. Lets him feel the warmth of a place that isn't a cage, isn't a chain, isn't a prison. At first, he barely eats. She places fresh kibble in front of him, but he just stares at it, his ribs still sharp beneath his dull fur. Old habits die hard. He's learned food isn't always promised. That eating too fast might mean there's nothing left later. So he waits. Hours pass before he takes his first bite. But he does eat. The days stretch on, and Rex stays at the edges of everything. He watches the other dogs chase each other through the yard, rolling in the grass, snapping playfully at the air. His ears twitch when they bark, his head tilting ever so slightly, like he's trying to understand why they're so happy. One evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and deep purples, Sarah sits on the porch, a cup of tea warming her hands. The other dogs settle around her, tongues lolling, eyes sleepy from an afternoon of play. But Rex lingers near the fence, caught between two worlds, one he's always known and one he doesn't understand. Then, something shifts. He steps forward. Just one paw. Then another. The old Rex, the one who flinched at every sound, who shrank at every movement, he hesitates. But something deeper, something buried beneath the years of neglect, it urges him on. Sarah doesn't move. She barely breathes. Then, slowly, so slowly it feels like time itself has stopped, Rex inches closer, his body tight, his head low, his breath shallow. His paws make no sound on the wooden porch as he closes the space between them, his amber eyes locked onto hers. And then, without warning, he rests his head against her knee. Sarah's breath catches. She doesn't reach for him. Doesn't speak. She just sits, letting him choose. The weight of his head is light, barely there. But to Rex, it's everything. It's a test. A risk. A question, am I safe here? Sarah blinks back tears. And softly, gently, she whispers, good boy. Rex doesn't pull away. For the first time, he stays. The house is silent. The kind of deep, midnight silence where even the walls seem to be holding their breath. Outside, the wind rattles through the trees, whispering through the branches, sending dried leaves skittering across the porch. Inside, Sarah sleeps soundly, curled beneath a heavy blanket, her breathing steady, the rhythmic tick of the clock filling the empty spaces of the night. Then, a noise. A sharp, metallic clang echoes from the side of the house. Not the wind. Not an animal. Something heavier. Something deliberate. Rex's ears flick. His eyes snap open. For a moment, he stays still, his body frozen in the dark. His breathing is slow, controlled. Then, another sound, closer this time. The scrape of metal against wood. A hushed voice. A quiet grunt. Something inside him shifts. He rises from his spot near the bedroom door, moving like a shadow, his body tense, muscles coiled. His paws press against the hardwood floor, silent but sure. His heartbeat quickens, his ears twitching, every nerve in his body attuned to the intruder's next move. Then, glass shatters. The sharp pop of a window breaking pierces the silence, followed by the creak of a frame giving way. Sarah jolts awake, her heart slamming against her ribs. She blinks into the darkness, disoriented, her breath caught in her throat. Before she can move, before she can even think, Rex does. A deep, earth-shaking growl rolls from his chest, unlike anything she's ever heard before. It's not fear. Not uncertainty. It's raw, primal. A warning. A promise. Sarah scrambles out of bed, her pulse pounding. She barely makes it to the hallway before she sees him, standing rigid at the end of the corridor, his body low, his fur bristling, his teeth bared. The dog she once found curled in the dirt, too afraid to lift his head, is gone. In his place stands something powerful, something unshaken. A protector. A sudden movement, a shadow passing the window. Then the sound of a door handle twisting. Rex's growl deepens. His tail stiffens. His lips curl, exposing sharp white teeth. Then, he lunges. A thunderous bark explodes from his throat, shaking the walls, filling every inch of the house. It's not just noise, it's force. A sound that carries years of pain, of fear, of quiet suffering now turned into something unbreakable. Outside, the intruder hesitates. There's a shuffle. A hurried curse. Then, footsteps, running. The sound of shoes scraping against pavement, retreating into the night. Then, silence. Rex stays by the door, his body still tense, his chest rising and falling in rapid bursts. Sarah can hardly breathe. She reaches for the light, her fingers trembling as the bulb flickers on. The room is empty now. The only sign of what almost happened is the single jagged crack in the glass. Slowly, cautiously, she looks at Rex. His ears are still perked, his eyes sharp, alert. But when she steps closer, when she kneels beside him, reaching a shaking hand toward his fur, he doesn't flinch. He leans into her touch. A choked breath escapes her lips, half a laugh, half a sob. "You saved me," she whispers. Rex exhales through his nose, his body finally relaxing, his tail giving a single, slow wag. Not out of excitement. Not out of hesitation. But out of certainty. Because for the first time in his life, he knows where he belongs. His massive body stretched out, his chest rising and falling in steady, peaceful breaths. For the first time since she brought him home, he looks content. Not tense. Not braced for the worst. Just here. She kneels beside him, reaching out slowly, brushing her fingers through his thick fur. He stirs, ears twitching, then, for the first time ever, he lets out a deep, satisfied sigh and presses his head into her touch. Sarah swallows past the lump in her throat. This is the same dog that once wouldn't make eye contact. The same dog that shrank at the sound of footsteps. The same dog who wouldn't eat because he didn't trust that food would always be there. But now, he trusts her. The news spreads fast. The local paper picks up the story, calling Rex a real-life hero. A reporter comes by, snapping photos of him standing proudly in the yard, ears perked, tail held high. The shelter posts an update about his transformation, how the once unadoptable dog found his perfect home. And then the calls start coming in. People who once overlooked him now want him. Strangers flood the shelter with adoption requests, asking about the brave German Shepherd. Families want a protector. A survivor. A dog with a story. But the shelter only gives them one answer: Rex isn't available. He already has a home. Sarah watches the messages roll in, her heart aching, not for Rex, but for the others. The ones still waiting. The ones still curled up in shelter corners, too afraid to hope. She glances at Rex, who now lies in the sunlight, eyes half closed, tail thumping lazily against the floor. He isn't just safe now. He's happy. Whole. And for the first time, Sarah knows, his story isn't just about survival. It's about second chances. And now, it's time to give another dog theirs. The seasons have changed. The bitter chill of winter has faded into the crisp warmth of early spring. The trees, once bare and lifeless, now stretch toward the sky, their branches bursting with fresh green leaves. The scent of damp earth and blooming flowers drifts through the air, carried by the soft breeze that rustles through the yard. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sings, a bright, cheerful melody that fills the morning stillness. And there, sitting on the porch, his head held high, sits Rex. He is not the same dog Sarah found trembling in the corner of that shelter. Not the same skeletal shadow that flinched at every sound, that refused to meet her gaze, that braced for pain instead of kindness. The fear that once lived in his eyes is gone, replaced by something deeper, something unshakable. Confidence. Strength. Peace. Sarah watches him, coffee in hand, unable to stop the quiet smile that tugs at her lips. She still remembers the first night he came home, the way he hovered at the doorway, too afraid to cross the threshold. Now, he moves through the house like he belongs. Because he does. The sound of paws thudding against the ground catches her attention, and she glances toward the yard. A second dog, a younger, lankier mutt with a patchy coat and oversized ears, bounds toward Rex, tail wagging, eyes bright with mischief. The pup yips, darting in playful circles, trying to get a reaction. And then, it happens. Rex moves. Not away, not in hesitation, but forward. With one swift motion, he leaps, chasing after the pup, his deep bark echoing through the yard, not in fear, not in warning, but in joy. His powerful legs push off the ground as he runs, his body strong, steady, free. The younger dog scrambles to keep up, paws kicking up tufts of grass as they weave between the trees, tails whipping through the air. Sarah exhales, something warm blooming in her chest. Because this is who Rex was always meant to be. Not a forgotten dog chained to a post. Not a number on a shelter intake form. Not a victim. But alive. Loved. Whole. He slows, trotting back toward the porch, his tongue lolling, his amber eyes, bright with something Sarah has never seen before, happiness without hesitation. He stops in front of her, pressing his nose into her palm, letting out a slow, contented breath. She kneels, stroking the thick fur along his back. "You're home," she murmurs. The words aren't a question anymore. They're the truth. Rex lifts his head, standing tall, his ears perked as the wind ruffles through his coat. He is no longer afraid of the world. Because now, for the first time in his life, the world is his. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to see the potential in a broken soul. Because when given a second chance, even the most neglected hearts can learn to love again.